We do not want, as the newspapers say, a church that will move with the world. We want a church that will move the world. The really great man is the man who makes every man feel great. The Christian ideal has not been tried and found wanting. It has been found difficult and left untried. When we were children, we were grateful to those who filled our stockings at Christmas time. Why are we not grateful to God for filling our stockings with legs? To love means loving the unlovable. To forgive means pardoning the unpardonable. Faith means believing the unbelievable. Hope means hoping when everything seems hopeless. The vulgar man is always the most distinguished, for the very desire to be distinguished is vulgar. There are those who hate Christianity and call their hatred an all-embracing love for all religions. If there were no God, there would be no atheists. Let your religion be less of a theory and more of a love affair. When it comes to life, the critical thing is whether you take things for granted or take them with gratitude. Compromise used to mean that half a loaf was better than no bread. Among modern statesmen, it really seems to mean that half a loaf is better than a whole loaf. The true object of all human life is play. Earth is a task garden. Heaven is a playground. Jesus promised the disciples three things: that they would be completely fearless, absurdly happy, and in constant trouble. The most dangerous criminal now is the entirely lawless modern philosopher. Compared to him, burglars and bigamists are essentially moral men. A Puritan is a person who pours righteous indignation into the wrong things. A teacher who is not dogmatic is simply a teacher who is not teaching. Once I planned to write a book of poems entirely about the things in my pocket, but I found it would be too long, and the age of the great epics is past. The issue is now clear. It is between light and darkness, and everyone must choose his side. It is shorter to state the things forbidden than the things permitted, precisely because most things are permitted and only a few things forbidden. Science in the modern world has many uses. Its chief use, however, is to provide long words to cover the errors of the rich. No man who worships education has got the best out of education. Without a gentle contempt for education, no man's education is complete. The poor have sometimes objected to being governed badly. The rich have always objected to being governed at all. If I had only one sermon to preach, it would be a sermon against pride. We call a man a bigot or a slave of dogma because he is a thinker who has thought thoroughly and to a definite end. A yawn is a silent shout. Gratitude is the mother of all the virtues. It is as healthy to enjoy sentiment as to enjoy jam. The family is the test of freedom, because the family is the only thing that the free man makes for himself and by himself. Education is the period during which you are being instructed by somebody you do not know, about something you do not want to know. One of the great disadvantages of hurry is that it takes such a long time. Happy is he who still loves something he loved in the nursery. He has not been broken in two by time. He is not two men, but one, and he has saved not only his soul but his life. A room without books is like a body without a soul. If I did not believe in God, I should still want my doctor, my lawyer, and my banker to do so. I would maintain that thanks are the highest form of thought, and that gratitude is happiness doubled by wonder. A new philosophy generally means in practice the praise of some old vice. True contentment is a thing as active as agriculture. It is the power of getting out of any situation all that there is in it. It is arduous and it is rare. Gullibility is the key to all adventures. The greenhorn is the ultimate victor in everything. It is he that gets the most out of life. Nothing is poetical if plain daylight is not poetical, and no monster should amaze us if the normal man does not amaze. Youth is the period in which a man can be hopeless. The end of every episode is the end of the world, but the power of hoping through everything, the knowledge that the soul survives its adventures, that great inspiration comes to the middle-aged. The word good has many meanings. For example, if a man were to shoot his grandmother at a range of 500 yards, I should call him a good shot, but not necessarily a good man. Man is an exception, whatever else he is. If he is not the image of God, then he is a disease of the dust. If it is not true that a divine being fell, then we can only say that one of the animals went entirely off its head. The present condition of fame is merely fashion. There are no rules of architecture for a castle in the clouds. New roads, new ruts. The world will never starve for want of wonders, but only for want of wonder. Those thinkers who cannot believe in any gods often assert that the love of humanity would be in itself sufficient for them, and so perhaps it would if they had it. Man does not live by soap alone, and hygiene, or even health, is not much good unless you can take a healthy view of it, or better still, feel a healthy indifference to it. I say that a man must be certain of his morality for the simple reason that he has to suffer for it. All slang is metaphor, and all metaphor is poetry. Christianity has not been tried and found wanting. It has been found difficult and not tried. My country, right or wrong, is a thing no patriot would ever think of saying except in a desperate case. It is like saying, my mother, drunk or sober. A woman uses her intelligence to find reasons to support her intuition. Buddhism is not a creed, it is a doubt. A good novel tells us the truth about its hero, but a bad novel tells us the truth about its author. White is not a mere absence of color. It is a shining and affirmative thing, as fierce as red, as definite as black. God paints in many colors, but he never paints so gorgeously, I had almost said so gaudily, as when he paints in white. The cosmos is about the smallest hole that a man can hide his head in. The mere brute pleasure of reading is the sort of pleasure a cow must have in grazing. People who make history know nothing about history. You can see that in the sort of history they make. It is not funny that anything else should fall down, only that a man should fall down. Why do we laugh? Because it is a gravely religious matter. It is the fall of man. Only man can be absurd, for only man can be dignified. One may understand the cosmos, but never the ego. The self is more distant than any star. Reason is always a kind of brute force. Those who appeal to the head rather than the heart, however pallid and polite, are necessarily men of violence. We speak of touching a man's heart, but we can do nothing to his head but hit it. The purpose of compulsory education is to deprive the common people of their common sense. Music with dinner is an insult both to the cook and the violinist. The fatal metaphor of progress, which means leaving things behind us, has utterly obscured the real idea of growth, which means leaving things inside us. One sees great things from the valley, only small things from the peak. I owe my success to having listened respectfully to the very best advice, and then going away and doing the exact opposite. Lying in bed would be an altogether perfect and supreme experience if only one had a colored pencil long enough to draw on the ceiling. Tolerance is the virtue of men who don't believe in anything. Tradition means giving votes to the most obscure of all classes, our ancestors. It is the democracy of the dead. Tradition refuses to submit to that arrogant oligarchy who merely happen to be walking around. We make our friends, we make our enemies, but God makes our next-door neighbor. And when it rains on your parade, look up rather than down. Without the rain, there would be no rainbow. But out of the desert, from the dry places and the dreadful suns, come the cruel children of the lonely God, the real Unitarians who with scimitar in hand have laid waste the world. For it is not well for God to be alone. Journalism is popular, but it is popular mainly as fiction. Life is one world, and life seen in the newspapers is another. Men feel that cruelty to the poor is a kind of cruelty to animals. They never feel that it is an injustice to equals. Nay, it is treachery to comrades. All architecture is great architecture after sunset. Perhaps architecture is really a nocturnal art, like the art of fireworks. Without education, we are in a horrible and deadly danger of taking educated people seriously. Cruelty is perhaps the worst kind of sin. Intellectual cruelty is certainly the worst kind of cruelty. Love is not blind, that is the last thing it is. Love is bound, and the more it is bound, the less it is blind. There is but an inch of difference between a cushioned chamber and a padded cell. There is a great deal of difference between an eager man who wants to read a book and the tired man who wants a book to read. Being contented ought to mean in English, as it does in French, being pleased. Being content with an attic ought not to mean being unable to move from it and resigned to living in it. It ought to mean appreciating all there is in such a position. Literature is a luxury. Fiction is a necessity. I've searched all the parks in all the cities and found no statues of committees. Fable is more historical than fact, because fact tells us about one man and fable tells us about a million men. Half a truth is better than no politics. Whatever else may be said of man, this one thing is clear. He is not what he is capable of being. There is nothing the matter with Americans except their ideals. The real American is all right. It is the ideal American who is all wrong. When we really worship anything, we love not only its clearness, but its obscurity. We exult in its very invisibility. The only way of catching a train I have ever discovered is to miss the train before. A radical generally meant a man who thought he could somehow pull up the root without affecting the flower. A conservative generally meant a man who wanted to conserve everything except his own reason for conserving anything. A man does not know what he is saying until he knows what he is not saying. The object of opening the mind, as of opening the mouth, is to shut it again on something solid. Tolerance is the virtue of the man without convictions. Art, like morality, consists in drawing the line somewhere. Courage is almost a contradiction in terms. It means a strong desire to live, taking the form of a readiness to die. Hell is God's great compliment to the reality of human freedom and the dignity of human choice. What affects men sharply about a foreign nation is not so much finding or not finding familiar things, it is rather not finding them in the familiar place. Marriage is an adventure, like going to war,